My name is Clara Densmore. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how the man I trusted most destroyed my world, and how I returned to make sure he never did it again. It started with 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test and a silly smile on my face. I was sitting in my car at a red light, staring at the picture I had just taken of the result. After 3 long years of fertility treatments, heartbreaks, and false hope, it was finally happening. I was going to be a mother. I couldn't wait to tell my husband, Ethan. Ethan had always talked about wanting children. Every time we passed a park or saw a little pair of shoes at a store, his eyes would soften. And his mother, Janet, well, she never missed a chance to ask, "When am I going to be a grandmother?" Usually with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That day, the sunlight poured gently through the windshield, and the radio played a song about love and forever. I usually ignored lyrics like that, but not today. I imagined Ethan's face lighting up when he saw the picture, how he'd pull me into his arms and maybe even cry. I imagined telling Janet, the family dinners, the nursery, the first heartbeat on the ultrasound. For a moment everything felt perfect. Then the truck hit me. Came from the left like a bullet out of nowhere. One moment I was dreaming of baby names, and the next the world was spinning, metal screaming, glass shattering. I remember trying to shield the phone. I remember the blood. I remember a man's voice shouting, "Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then silence. I woke up in a hospital, under lights that were too white and cold. My face felt numb, but I could feel tight bandages, and my mouth wouldn't move the way I wanted it to. There was a strange heaviness in my body, like I wasn't fully inside it. Ethan was there, slouched in a chair beside my bed. He looked awful, wrinkled shirt, messy hair, unshaven. He was staring at the floor like it held all the answers to a question he was too afraid to ask. "Ethan," I tried to whisper. My voice sounded like it had come from someone else entirely. His head shot up, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Not joy. Not relief. Something else. Panic. Guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by a carefully crafted smile. "You had me so worried," he said, taking my hand. It was cold. I tried to ask about the baby. I already knew, but I had to hear it. "The baby," croaked. He didn't answer right away. Just squeezed my hand, his lips trembling. "I'm so sorry, Clara." Everything inside me cracked. Later, Janet breezed into the room, her perfume filling the space like a weapon. "Ethan, the doctor needs to speak with you about options," she said in her usual hushed but commanding voice. Ethan left with her. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. "She'll need major reconstruction," I heard Ethan say softly. Her face. "Mom, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can handle this." They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought I couldn't understand that I had just become a burden, a broken thing, a responsibility he didn't want to carry. That was the exact moment Clara Densmore, the woman who believed in love, in loyalty, in fairy tale endings, began to die. And someone else began to take her place. Someone stronger, colder, martyr. When I was finally released and sent home, Ethan had transformed our living room into a makeshift bedroom. "I thought you'd be more comfortable here," he said. The words were sweet. But he never met my eyes. Never touched me unless he had to. Janet was everywhere. Managing my meals, my meds, my appointments. "We just want what's best for you," she'd say. "Ethan needs to focus on work, and we can't have any more stress." One night I heard him in the kitchen, drunk, laughing. "She looks like Two-Face from Batman," he slurred. I can't look at her." I pressed my hands to my mouth to stop from screaming. The next day, while he was at work, I crawled upstairs, slowly, painfully, and searched for my old art box. It was gone from our bedroom. I finally found it in the basement, under dusty holiday decorations. Buried. Forgotten. But it was still intact. I brought it downstairs, set up a canvas, and began to paint. I didn't know what I was painting until it appeared. A woman's face, half beautiful, half destroyed. Red and black smeared across the canvas. It was me. It was what they saw when they looked at me. When Ethan came home that night and saw the painting, his eyes widened. "What is this?" he asked, almost afraid. "This," I said, "is how I heal." Janet looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Clara dear, let's not focus on. I'm not your project," I said, cutting her off. "Not anymore." They didn't understand what was happening. They thought they'd broken me. They had no idea I was just getting started. The days after that confrontation in the living room passed like thick syrup, slow, suffocating, and bitter. Ethan barely spoke to me. Janet stopped pretending to care. My meals were left on trays with notes, not words. I was becoming invisible in my own home. But I wasn't idle. Painted. Every stroke became an exorcism. Each canvas a confession of pain and rage. I painted in darkness and silence, channeling the ghost of the woman I used to be, allowing her to scream without sound. I never expected anyone else to see them. Until one rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled low outside and my fingers were smudged with black and red, my phone blinked with a notification. Just a small light. But it changed everything. "Are you Clara Densmore? My name is Maxim Cressy. My son caused your accident. I need to meet you." I stared at the message so long that my tea went cold. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, one that had sharpened since that hospital bed, pressed reply. "Where and when?" We met at a small cafe tucked into the older part of town. I wore a scarf pulled high on my cheeks, the healing skin beneath still tight and tender. The place smelled like cinnamon and wet bricks. Maxim stood when I entered, a man in his early 50s with tired eyes and trembling hands. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I have 10 minutes, I replied flatly. He nodded, sat, and then began. "My son Jason. He wasn't alone the night of the crash. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He was hired." "Hired?" he echoed, confused. "To follow someone. To intimidate her. She was having an affair. With your husband." It was as if the walls around me collapsed inward. Maxim reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the table. "Your husband hired my son to scare her. But she convinced Jason to drive her out of town instead. That's when they hit you. She fled the scene. Jason stayed." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Hotel receipts, photos, security footage. Ethan and the woman, blonde, young, wearing a green coat I recognized from his office holiday party, laughing, walking into the Golden Leaf Hotel. Saturday after Saturday. My heart didn't break. Turned to ice. "She works at Griffin Marketing," Maxim added. "Your husband's company. And why are you telling me this?" "Yes. To clear your conscience." "No. To stop him. He used my son, discarded him, and now Jason's facing jail alone. I want justice." Justice. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. But I kept the envelope. That night I couldn't sleep. My fingers caressed every document inside that folder, again and again, until the edges were worn. Ethan had lied. Betrayed. And worse, he had used me. Not just emotionally. Physically. Took me 2 days to confirm the worst part. I hadn't touched my banking apps since the accident. My fingerprints had been disabled due to my injuries, so I hadn't checked the balances. But something had nagged at me, little signs. A missing bracelet. The way Ethan flinched when I mentioned hospital bills. And when I opened the app, I felt my stomach twist. Every savings account, every joint investment, cleared. Over $347,000. He had used my fingerprint while I was unconscious. My hand, my trust, to authorize the transfers. Everything I had built from years of freelancing, late-night deadlines, art commissions, and inheritance from my father, erased. My breath left my lungs in one ragged sob. I sat there, staring at the phone screen, rage creeping up my spine like wildfire. The next morning, I confronted him. He was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. "You drained our accounts," I said, holding up my phone. He didn't even flinch. "We had medical bills. Janet helped cover a few. You used my fingerprint while I was in a coma. It was for us, he said. You wouldn't have understood the pressure I was under. You were not yourself. I did what needed to be done. You stole from me. I took care of us. His voice finally rose, defensive. Do you even hear yourself? After everything I've done for you. I laughed. A single bitter, hollow laugh. Everything you've done to me. He stared at me, his face twisting in frustration. You need help, Clara. Real help. You're losing it. No, I said calmly. I finally found it. That night I packed a small bag. I took only what mattered. My documents, the folder from Maxim, my art supplies, and my will to rise again. I left them a note. You took my face, my money, my trust. You won't take what's coming next. Goodbye, Ethan. I went to a private clinic Maxim had recommended. The receptionist didn't bat an eye when I asked for Dr. James Harper. He was expecting me. The first consultation was quiet, clinical. This isn't about hiding, I told him. It's about taking control. Then we'll rebuild, he said. Not just your appearance. Your identity. The months that followed were painful. Bone grafts, scar revisions, muscle therapy, but also rebirth. With every procedure, Clara Densmore faded into memory. With every stitch, I felt her pain closing into a sealed vault. When I looked in the mirror 6 months later, I saw someone else. My name was no longer Clara. It was now Mia Cressy. Maxim helped me create everything. A new identity, a new home, a new bank account, even a story. His niece returning from Europe after years abroad. I didn't need vengeance. I needed closure. But to get that I had to return. Not as the broken wife. Not even as the betrayed woman. I would come back as a stranger. A storm wrapped in silence. And when Ethan saw me again, he would understand exactly what he had destroyed. The air was sharp the day I stood outside the house that used to be mine. The house where I'd once cooked Sunday dinners, folded baby clothes in hopeful anticipation, and curled up next to the man I thought loved me. A house filled with memories and lies. Now it felt like the set of a life I no longer belonged to. The tulips I had planted were gone. The cheery welcome mat replaced with a cold, grey one that simply said home. It was ironic, really, because it never had been, not truly. I wore a black wool coat that hugged my new figure, a silk scarf tucked over my neck, high-heeled boots, hair dyed a deep chestnut and swept into a sleek twist. I looked nothing like Clara Densmore. Not even my reflection could betray me now. But I remembered every creak in that gate as I opened it. I remembered the scent of the jasmine bush by the porch and the way the door stuck just slightly when you pushed it. It was still my house. Legally. He just didn't know that yet. I stepped inside. Laughter drifted from the dining room. Ethan's and Janet's voices. Free. Plotting. If she doesn't respond soon, we can proceed with the annulment, Janet said, her voice smooth and saccharine. The accident was really a blessing in disguise. I just want this all to be over, Ethan replied. I'm tired of pretending to care. I stepped into the doorway. How convenient then that I've just returned. The silence hit like a punch. Ethan turned, his green eyes going wide as dinner plates. Janet's wine glass slipped slightly in her hand but didn't spill. Who? Ethan stammered, stepping forward. Who are you? I smiled, calm and cold. You don't recognize me? Janet narrowed her eyes. If this is about the property. I'm not here for the house, I said, placing my handbag on the table. I'm here for the truth. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I opened it and laid everything out. Photographs, receipts, copies of texts. A voice recorder clicked on. Ethan's voice, loud and clear. Follow her. Scare her. But don't actually cause an accident. Janet gasped. Ethan, what is this? Ethan backed into the wall. His face was pale and sweating. It's taken out of context, he stammered. This is a setup. You emptied my accounts, I said. Used my unconscious hand to transfer my life savings. Slept with your intern. Sent someone to stalk and intimidate her. And you crashed into me instead. You murdered my child and mutilated my face. Janet shook her head, now standing, hands trembling. Ethan, tell me she's lying. I turned fully toward them, letting the light hit my face. Letting them see the beautiful, sculpted stranger I had become. The stranger they had created. I was Clara, I said softly. But you buried her in your greed. I'm Mia Cressy now. And I brought friends. Right on cue, 2 women stepped into the foyer. I had waited for this moment for months. Audrey, in a green silk dress, strong and calm. And Naomi, wearing a tailored navy blazer. Her hair pinned up in a no-nonsense twist. Both survivors. Both victims of Ethan's manipulation, lies, and sexual coercion. Your past is not staying buried, Ethan, Audrey said. Janet looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. This can't be true. It's all documented, Naomi added, pulling out her own stack of evidence. He lied, used us, threatened us. Ethan's eyes darted between us like a trapped animal. You're trying to ruin me. You did that yourself, I said. You wanted power. Congratulations. You're about to become very famous. I pushed a set of divorce papers forward. Sign. Or we press charges. Financial fraud. Medical manipulation. Emotional abuse. And we go public. He stared at the pen like it was a knife. Janet stepped forward, her eyes hollow. Sign it, Ethan. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. And he signed. My heart didn't pound. Didn't ache. It was steady. After all the pain, all the nights crying into my bandages, all the days alone with my broken dreams, I wasn't broken anymore. I was free. And I wasn't done yet. 3 weeks later, a quiet art gallery opened on a side street in the city. No flashy ads. No media blitz. Just a name. Fragments. Inside, on white walls, my paintings stretched like scars made beautiful. Faces torn in half, light and dark. Women emerging from fire. A man with no eyes and many mouths. Every piece told a story. My story. At the center of the room, one piece. Saturday night at the Golden Leaf. A man in a gray suit under the shadowed lights of a hotel lobby. His face was blurred, indistinct. But every woman in the crowd that night would recognize him. The room was filled with whispers, praise, curiosity, and then him. Ethan stood across the room, stunned, a wine glass tipping in his hand. He stared at the painting as if it might reach out and choke him. And just like I knew she would, Audrey stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, raising her voice. This isn't just art. It's truth. It's survival. And it's time. People turned. Eyes followed. I was one of many. Manipulated. Abused. Silenced. And now no more. Other women began to step forward. Quiet at first, then louder. Tide of voices. Ethan tried to speak. This is slander. But no one listened. I stepped into the light, my heart as steady as the brushstrokes I had painted with. You wrote your own ending, Ethan. Now live with it. The gallery's security didn't move. They weren't there to protect him. Camera flashes lit the room. Social media posts began to explode. Hashtag Griffin revealed. Hashtag justice for the silent. Hashtag Mia Cressy truth. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And I still had more to say. The aftermath of the gallery night unraveled like a slow explosion. By the next morning, my name, Mia Cressy, was trending. Not because people knew who I used to be, but because of what the art had revealed. Anonymous artist exposes corporate predator through haunting portraits. Real-life victims of marketing execs speak out in viral gallery protest. Who is Mia Cressy? I watched it unfold from a safe distance. My phone buzzed endlessly, but I ignored the calls. I wasn't interested in fame. Only truth. Only justice. And it was coming. Ethan's company tried to issue a statement. Something vague about artistic expression, and unsubstantiated accusations. But it was too late. Audrey had already posted her receipts. Naomi followed. Then 3 more women. Then 5. Then 9. Screenshots, voicemails, emails, hotel check-ins, corporate threats. Spread like wildfire. And then came the knock at Ethan's door. I didn't witness the arrest. I didn't need to. I only saw the footage later. Grainy cell phone video from across the street. Ethan in a wrinkled shirt, yelling at the officers. Janet clutching her pearls in the background, as if the entire world had betrayed her. "Do you know who I am?" Ethan had shouted. "Yes," one officer replied. "That's exactly why we're here." He was charged with financial fraud, corporate coercion, and obstruction of justice. The district attorney's office, under public pressure, reopened 2 previous harassment cases linked to his name. The stock in his company plummeted. Their clients disappeared within weeks. Janet tried to save face. Released a public statement about being shocked and heartbroken. I knew better. She was only heartbroken that the scandal tainted her name. I should have felt victorious. But what I felt was tired. I returned to my small apartment by the coast, a quiet space that smelled like fresh linen and sea air. Kept the lights low. Cooked my own food. I slept with the windows cracked open. Freedom was quiet. Healing wasn't about noise. It was about silence. Finally. Then came Colton. I met Colton at one of my outpatient therapy sessions in the city. He was there with his sister, who had survived a similar trauma. He had kind eyes, strong shoulders, and he asked nothing from me. He never asked what had happened to my face, or why I always wore long sleeves, even in summer. He only offered warmth. Over time we talked. He learned about Clara, about Mia, about every shade in between. He listened. Not once did he look at me with pity. He looked at me like I was whole, even when I didn't feel it. "You're like driftwood," he said one night as we sat by the beach. "Tossed around, scarred, shaped by storms, but beautiful. And still here." I cried not from pain, but from the terrifying feeling of being seen. We grew close. Slowly. No grand gestures. No promises. Just presence. Weeks turned into months. The gallery was re-invited to exhibit in Paris, New York, and Tokyo. I declined them all. Instead I kept painting. For me. Sometimes for Audrey and the others too. I would sketch the outlines of their pain, and then fill them in with strength. Their scars became strokes. Their tears became texture. We were building something new. Then one morning a letter arrived. A real letter. Not a text. Not a notification. Cream-colored paper. Thick envelope. From the office of District Attorney Maribel Lopez. I sat at the small kitchen table and opened it. "Dear Ms. Cressy, we are pleased to inform you that the trial of Mr. Ethan Griffin has concluded with a guilty verdict. Due to your cooperation and the evidence you provided, the court has sentenced Mr. Griffin to 14 years in federal prison, with no option for early parole. On behalf of our office and the survivors you helped empower, thank you." I read it twice, then 3 times, and then I cried. Not out of sorrow, not out of vengeance, but because it was done. There was no more monster to run from. That night, Colton brought over wildflowers. He didn't say anything at first. Just set them in a vase, poured 2 cups of tea, and sat across from me. "You saw the news?" "Yes." He nodded. "Yeah." I waited for the questions. The analysis. The what now? But Colton simply reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. And that was enough. We went down to the beach as the sun began to set, the sky painted in soft orange and deepening indigo. I slipped off my shoes and stepped into the surf. The water was cold. Invigorating. "Do you think people really start over?" I asked him, watching the waves roll in. "I think people become who they were always meant to be," he said. And for once I believed it. Not because it sounded poetic, but because it felt true. I had died once. Maybe more than once. But I was alive now. Not as Clara Densmore. Not even fully as Mia Cressy. But as someone entirely new. Someone strong. Someone free. And soon, someone ready to live again. I never imagined that peace would be so quiet. After years of noise, of hospital machines, slammed doors, Janet's barbed smiles, Ethan's hollow excuses, silence felt almost suspicious. I kept waiting for something to shatter it. Phone call. Threat. A ghost. But the ghosts no longer had power over me. Every morning, I woke in a small sunlit bedroom where the ocean whispered outside my window. The walls were lined with canvases, some complete, others just sketches. The kettle whistled at 6:45 a.m. Colton would often arrive by 7, bringing fresh bagels and quiet company. He didn't need to fix me. He didn't even try. He just stayed. The woman I was becoming had no name at first. Mia Cressy had served her purpose. She had exposed the rot, delivered justice, held her enemies' eyes as they fell from their pedestal. But I needed something different now. Something not born out of betrayal. So I chose one, Bianca Claire Griffin. Bianca meaning white, clean, new, reborn. Claire for clarity. And yes, Griffin, because I earned that name more than Ethan ever did. The estate, the money he stole, the house I reclaimed. All mine now. My lawyer had managed to undo the damages of Ethan's theft, piece by piece. The courts froze his accounts, traced the money trail, and returned what they could. It wasn't all of it. But it was enough. Enough to start again. Enough to choose a name I wasn't given, but had earned. One Sunday afternoon, I visited the cemetery where they buried the baby. There was no headstone, no name. Just a grassy plot under a willow tree with a small wooden plaque that read, Angel Baby, November 6th. Hurt. More than I thought it would. I had imagined myself stronger. But when I knelt by the plaque, the wind blew softly through the leaves, and something in me gave way. Sob. Deep, guttural, body-racking sobs. Not because I hadn't grieved, but because I finally felt safe enough to. I'm sorry, I whispered. I couldn't protect you, but I'll carry you with me. Forever. Colton stood a few feet behind, hands in his pockets, silent. He didn't come closer. Just waited until I stood again, mascara streaking my face, the wind drying my tears. When I turned to him, he simply said, "Let's go home." And I did. 'Cause for the first time in years I had won. News of Ethan's sentencing exploded on every news channel by the end of the week. Former marketing executive Ethan Griffin sentenced to 14 years for fraud and misconduct. Multiple victims testify in high-profile abuse case. Judge calls it calculated psychological warfare. Ex-wife refuses to testify, cites peace chosen over closure. I didn't sit in the courtroom. I didn't need to hear it. What mattered was that the world finally saw him for who he was. What mattered more was that I no longer had to prove anything. I went back to painting. But this time the colors were different. Not just reds and blacks and bruised blues. There were warm ambers, sky blues, pastels. I painted open hands, laughter lines, a mother and child with halos of light. Each stroke was a piece of me returning. Not the old Clara, but Bianca, full and radiant. Then came the invitation. An independent gallery in Milan, Galleria Luce, wanted to feature my work. They had seen the viral exhibit from months ago and tracked me down through a private art broker. The email was polite, reverent, even protective. "We believe your art is a testament to survival. We would be honored to host your first international solo exhibition." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of fear. Oh. Once, Ethan told me I would never be more than a hobbyist with a tragic backstory. Now Italy was calling. I told Colton over dinner. Grilled salmon, roasted rosemary potatoes, and a chilled bottle of white wine. "You're going," he said without hesitation. "But," he shook his head. "No buts. This is your moment. And you." He smiled softly. "I'll be here when you get back. Or maybe I'll visit. I've never been to Milan." We toasted. To new chapters. To surviving. to thriving. And that night, as we watched the stars from my tiny balcony, I allowed myself something I hadn't dared to feel since the crash. Unfiltered, full-bodied joy. Before I left for Milan, I visited one last place. The gallery that had started it all. The one where Saturday Night at the Golden Leaf had debuted. It was quiet now. Between exhibits, empty white walls and the faint smell of paint, I stood in the center of the room, closed my eyes, listened to the silence, and then I whispered, "Thank you," to every part of me that had once felt shattered, to the voices that rose up, to the women who came forward, to the fire that had not consumed me, but forged me. Thank you. Then I turned and walked out. The moment I stepped off the plane at Malpensa Airport, a strange calm settled over me. This was a new country. A new language swirling around me in soft, lyrical tones. A new rhythm where no one knew my past, where Clara Densmore had never existed, and Mia Cressy was just an echo. Here I was only Bianca Claire Griffin, an artist, a woman of strength, a woman reborn. The driver the gallery sent held a simple sign with my name. He didn't ask questions. He just smiled and carried my bags to the sleek black town car. As we drove through the winding streets of Milan, past stone facades and iron balconies draped in flowers, I stared out the window and wondered if this was what real healing felt like. Not just surviving your past, but creating a future so beautiful that the past became smaller in its shadow. The gallery was stunning. Galleria Luce, tucked between a boutique leather shop and a quiet church. White marble floors, arched ceilings, and lighting that fell soft as moonlight. My paintings had already arrived, each one lovingly uncrated and positioned exactly as I requested. My new collection, Light After the Burn, was nothing like fragments. Gone were the fractured faces and smears of rage. Here I painted open windows, blooming trees, women dancing barefoot in the rain. But there was still truth in each canvas. They weren't soft. They were honest. Healing wasn't erasing the pain. It was allowing light to exist beside it. At the exhibit's opening, I wore a long navy dress and a simple gold necklace. I kept my hair down, my scars soft and hidden behind waves. I didn't need to prove anything. People came. Journalists, collectors, survivors. I spoke little, but my paintings spoke for me. One woman stood in front of a piece titled, "After the Fire, We Sing." She wept, quietly but completely. She looked at me. This is the first time I've felt seen. And I understood her. More than I could ever say. Later that night, after the exhibit closed and the staff locked the gallery, I walked the cobblestone streets alone. My heels clicked in rhythm with the distant sound of church bells. My phone buzzed. It was Colton. He saw the photos. "You look like you belong there." "Me, I think I do. But I miss you. See, come home when you're ready. Or let me come to you. Very soon. One last thing to finish here." I didn't tell him what it was. The next morning, I sat on the sun-drenched terrace of a small cafe. A steaming cappuccino in front of me. A worn leather-bound notebook open beside it. In it I wrote letters. To myself. Clara. To the child I never got to meet. To Ethan. The one to Ethan took the longest. I didn't write out of hate. I didn't even want to send it. I wrote it for closure. To name every wound. To reclaim every piece of myself he tried to take. When I finished, I tore the page out, folded it, and set it aflame in the little dish of the candle on the table. The ash curled and rose into the wind, just like he had from my life. 2 days before I was set to return home, I received an invitation to a private gathering hosted by a foundation for women survivors of violence. They had heard about my exhibit. They asked me to speak. I hesitated at first. Public speaking had never been my strength, especially not about that. But something in me said yes. The evening was intimate, maybe 30 women, all seated in a small amphitheater. When I took the microphone, my palms were damp. My heart thudded. But when I spoke, my voice didn't waver. "I'm not going to tell you I survived," I began. "Because survival isn't the end. It's just the beginning." I told them the story. Not all the details, not the names, but the truth. How love can disguise control. How betrayal can arrive slowly, silently, until it feels like your fault. I told them how I lost everything, including my face. How I was reborn. And how, sometimes you have to let go of everything, including who you used to be, to truly find peace. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone began to clap. Then everyone did. And in that moment, for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. Or even a survivor. I felt like a woman who had rebuilt her life, stroke by stroke, word by word. Felt whole. The next morning I boarded a plane back to the States. No fanfare. No announcements. Just peace in my heart and a small envelope of thank you letters from the women who had heard me speak. When I arrived at the airport, Colton was there waiting. He held flowers again and wore that same patient smile. He didn't say much. Just, "Welcome home, Bianca." And I knew deep in my bones that I finally was. There's something almost surreal about returning to the place where your pain began. This time, not to revisit it, but to outgrow it. It had been a full year since I last walked past the front gate of my old house. The tulips had grown back, unintentionally, their orange-red petals swaying in the wind. Life has a strange way of persisting even when we try to erase it. This time, I wasn't there to confront. I wasn't there to reclaim. I had already done all of that. I was there to close the chapter. Colton stood beside me, our fingers loosely intertwined. "I didn't think I'd ever see this place again," I said quietly. "You don't have to go in," he replied. "I don't need to," I smiled. "I just wanted to see it one last time, to prove that it doesn't scare me anymore." I stood there for a few more minutes. No tears. No trembling. Just peace. And then we turned around, walked back to the car and drove home. My home. The days that followed were filled with small, quiet joys. Fresh sheets hung in the sunlight. New canvases drying on the balcony. The scent of Colton's coffee drifting in before sunrise. The calm of a life not haunted by secrets. I gave an interview for a podcast called Unbroken Voices. It was the first time I'd ever spoken publicly, with my real name, about everything. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I talked about the accident, the betrayal, the theft of my body and my voice. I talked about the pain of being seen as a burden, of being hidden away, of losing a child without even getting to say goodbye. But I also talked about rebuilding. About how justice isn't always about courts and verdicts. It's about choosing to live again. On your terms. The episode went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Thousands of women wrote to me. Some men too. They said my story gave them hope. That it reminded them they weren't alone. That healing was possible. That meant more to me than anything. One morning I received a small package with no return address. Inside was a leather-bound book. It was my journal, the one I had kept before the accident, filled with dreams of motherhood, sketches, poems, and little notes about life with Ethan. First I recoiled. My heart thudded. But then I saw the note tucked inside. "You were never the broken one. You were the light we failed to see." From someone who finally does. No signature. But I knew it was from Janet. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some ghosts bury themselves. A year to the day after the gallery opening, I hosted my own event. Not in New York or Paris. Right here in my coastal town. I called it Resilience in Color. The gallery wasn't large, but it was packed. Survivors, artists, friends. Audrey flew in. Naomi too. Even Maxim came, quiet, humble, older now. We exchanged a single look that said everything. He had helped me when no one else had. In the center of the gallery hung my latest painting. It was called Bianca. Not a portrait. A silhouette surrounded by golden light, emerging from a storm. Her arms wide. Her head lifted. Oh. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Colton proposed to me that night. No audience. No kneeling. He simply sat beside me on our balcony, handed me a ring wrapped in canvas and asked, "Would you like to keep building this life with me?" Said yes, not because I needed him, but because I wanted him in the life I had built from nothing. And now here I am, sitting at the same window where I once wept for what was lost, now smiling at the life I never thought I'd have. My name is Bianca Claire Griffin. I am an artist, a survivor, a mother in my own way, a woman with scars that I no longer hide. The man who tried to erase me is gone, behind bars, forgotten by the world he once tried to control. But I'm still here, still painting, still rising, still loving, and still writing my story, with every color I was once told I didn't deserve to hold. Because this life, it's mine now, and I will never let anyone take it from me again. Bianca Claire Griffin's story is not just a tale of survival, but of rebirth, proof that from betrayal can come power, and from pain, purpose. If you've ever been broken, remember, your story isn't over. The world may not apologize, but you can still take back your voice. You can still rise. Thank you for listening to her journey. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more real stories of justice, resilience, and rebirth. Share your thoughts in the comments because sometimes just being heard is the first step toward healing.